ended abruptly. If I was watching the countdown, I probably would have noticed. All right. Well, welcome to another exciting episode of Ops Oops Origami. We're a day late and 12 minutes late because everybody's a chatty Cathy in the green room. So
we had to get our beauty faces on, Brian. We had to be ready.
Yes, that too. And minor technical difficulties, but we're good now. So welcome, and thank you everyone that has joined us for joining us.
Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So well, Chris, you want to introduce this show?
Let's sure. So today's topic, cleaning up after consultants and MSPs, or how much should you trust your consultant, or consultants, good or bad, or expedience versus good. You pick the way you want to think about this, but yeah. Let's dive in. It's about what's the good, the bad, and the ugly of having consultants or MSPs in your world. So yeah, go.
It was also to include contractors because there's just not enough room in the title, and it would get confusing to say or because I know a lot of people use the terms wrong, but there is a difference between contractors and consultants. Are you being paid for your opinion or for your labor?
Yeah, it really should be both, right? There's supposed to be a value proposition, is the way that I always look at it. Because I'm usually an internal person.
It kind of depends on what the ask is, and because there are consultants that help you choose things that don't really do anything, and then there's the kind of mix of them where you have a consultant that's also a contractor, where that consultant says, "Hey, I think you ought to do these things. Here's how we do it. Let's make a plan, and I'll help you get it done." Right? Those are the guys I like personally, that I know on this call that I like very much to do stuff for me.
Yeah,
and that's a good point, Rick, because like you have contractors.
I was saying, I think I'm a big fan of that too, because if you're a consultant and I can tell you, hey Rick, you should go with this system, and then I peace out, and then you find out later on, actually Chuck, well they don't have any skin in the game. There's no loss to them necessarily. Right. But if you're the consultant and contractor, well, you made that recommendation. The good captain goes down with his ship or her ship. It's like those people tend to be better, because just like with salespeople versus engineers, it's like marketing's going to talk a big game, and then the actual contractor engineer has to deliver. If they merge the two, tend to not lead you down darker paths.
Right. And that's what MSPs should be. Right, when we talk about, at least when I talk about MSPs, that they should be that consultant contractor, missing member of the team, if you will, or that added member of the team that should come in and help with the things that need to be done and make recommendations and keep things on track. And part of that monthly or yearly service, however you have that contracted, they should be going, hey, here's the new technology, here's the new security stuff, here's this, here's that. Let's start thinking about moving towards that goal or that direction or whatever. That's what I would hope to get out of my MSPs, instead of, writing that check once a month and then having to call them whenever I need something. Right. There's no, like you said, Travis, that value add, that value proposition isn't there. Right.
Yeah.
In that kind of a scenario. Sorry.
Once again, I found that the
monopolizing the call.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, no, it's good. I've worked for an MSP or two, and I've always thought the MSP's best place is like functions of scale, where you have a team of 5 internals, and like, I don't have access to all these automation platforms because it makes no sense. I'm just a one company, but you sort of blob them together. You have like what I've done with some of the audio code stuff is like you have the option of like you host a platform and then you share it with a whole bunch of smaller companies. They would unable to be able to perform or afford the platform by themselves or the team, but you kind of like socialize the costs, and then everyone gets a little piece of the pie, the amount that they actually need. It makes sense as as an entity of scale that you would otherwise not be able to do internally.
Yeah, especially for those enterprise type solutions that a smaller business then could justify doing the whole thing, could benefit from it as well.
Right. And like I think that might be one of the differentiators between like an MSP and a contractor as well. Like you might have a contractor that does some of those same things, but you're not expecting that contractor to come with tools and resources that encompass what an MSP should be bringing to the table, right? Like an MSP should be bringing some of those like aggregated capabilities, monitoring, automation, whatever it is, right? The stuff you can't afford as a single shop or a single person, but the MSP, because they're aggregating things together, can afford and should afford.
I would wonder if you guys make a differential between the two, because for me, MSP, consultant contractor, I kind of blend them together, but it's only because it's like I'm mostly been the internal guy on teams, and it's like we need a mercenary force, either to MSPs tend to be the operations people. They do the daily grind, but it's a lot of work, but I don't want to do it, or I don't because I have project work. Alternatively, contractors or consultants are like the temporary person that you need a plumber for a little while because you don't have a plumber on crew, and it makes no sense to make a full thing for like a one project for a turnover and then that's done. But I just kind of thought it as temp stuff.
So I guess
I think there's a lot of different flavors of MSP and contract, because sometimes, I mean, an MSP is doing all those things, and sometimes they're just somebody you get contractors from, and they don't actually provide any value beyond that. They're providing a body to do work.
Right.
At that point,
I don't know if you're paying MSP prices for a body to do work.
No, generally not.
Right.
You're not paying for that extra stuff. You're just paying for that body. It's basically a temp service at that point,
right?
And you usually wouldn't even call them an MSP.
No.
Right.
But if you're using your MSP in that capacity, you're
You're overpaying.
I mean, but to be clear, one of the services that an MSP might bring to the table is access to contract labor.
Yes.
Yeah, they probably have tiered levels. Yeah.
Well, Chris, you and I worked for an MSP that in the area one time, and they didn't differentiate that at all.
No.
And one of the downsides to MSPs, based on my experience back in the day with you and that company, was that we were kind of spread a little on the thin side. So instead of really servicing the company and becoming a part of their IT team or being their IT team, we would run in, do what needed to be done real quick, and then get out because of scheduling and things like that. So that's one of the downsides I see to a lot of MSPs. I rarely hear from the two or three companies that my current place has contracted with that when contracts expire won't get renewed, because I hardly ever hear from them.
Yeah.
Right.
So one of them sent me a bill today for work that's not scheduled. It hasn't even happened yet.
Well, and you're one of the reasons why this conversation came up.
Right.
Yeah.
Boy, when did we first talk about this? It was weeks ago.
Yeah.
But clean up after consultants, ones that are not holding up their end of the deal and just basically milking you for whatever they can.
Yeah.
Half doing projects that aren't really appropriate and just billing to bill.
And holding on to information that they shouldn't be holding on to, you know, like that's the other negative of the MSP, and sometimes even the contract consultant world, right? Like they do a thing for you, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, it's yours anytime," until you go to fire them, and they're like, "Oh no, that's mine. You got to pay me for that."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Never let an MSP own your documentation or any of your master accounts to like cloud services. Don't let them hold the keys to the castle for your DNS names, for your hosting, for boy, your SSL certs, that's less important. You can.
I mean,
That's
what I'll
the,
say is this: if your MSP ever lists on an invoice documentation or administration or
you own it.
or maintenance, whatever they say, you point to the invoice and you say, "No, I own it. You billed me for it."
Right.
Yeah.
Or like, I bought it.
Right.
And
Yeah,
I would say for like as a being a full timer for the most part, the thing that I see more often, it's sort of a meta narrative of lack of management and leadership. Because at that level, let's say me as a worker, I have no say. Like, is this MSP good or bad? It's like, what does it matter? I don't control the purse strings. You do, or accounting does.
Mhm.
And without the level of leadership and really knowledge, technical knowledge, because MSP rolls in or a contractor, consultant, whatever, does work, and here's the work, leader, boss person, and they're like, looks good, and then it comes down to me, the worker, I'm like, dude, what is this? This is garbage.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
like,
we
oh,
need
but they
to
said
redo
it's
all
done.
that.
It's like, yeah, or you'll see it's like, it's technically done. It's like, technically. We're like, dog, this isn't done.
I dealt with something recently that it was a development side of things, but it was an outsourced developer for some app or whatever. And when the brass came down to tax, it was what you just described. It was functionally working, but it was never tested like the full end-to-end user, the full life cycle of that whole process, and it was just falling apart. But it
that's what you're for, Andrew.
functionally worked.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm here
You're
for.
You're a tester, baby.
Every
You're
line on
beta.
that SAL was checked off.
Yeah.
But
Right.
What,
It doesn't
the term
actually
I've
work.
heard in from gaming companies, I'm sure you guys have probably heard this, MVP. I was like, oh, what do you mean? The most valuable player? No, minimum viable product.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
oh, that's god awful
Yeah.
term.
Right.
yeah,
It
also
Well,
technically works.
minimally viable solution as well. I've heard.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, let's not get into the Azure methodology, or sorry, the agile methodology. There is a place for it, right? The minimum viable product, it actually makes sense in certain contexts, but I'm not going to argue that point. The fact that so many things are like, well, what I delivered was like minimum viable product. Like, you're not paying me for fully developed product. Like,
Yeah.
my statement of work says I am.
Right.
Yeah.
But see, with
But I
Agile,
think
that's meant to be a
that's software
process.
dev
That's
world,
like,
right?
Correct.
yeah, that's meant to. You keep going from there, not like I'm done.
Yeah. And that's like a difference between dev world and ops world. Like ops, like network engineering and systems and whatever. It's like minimum viable product means our systems will barely function, but in the dev world, it's like, yeah, you've hit that level with the, like you said, Brian, the expectation that the development will continue and mature the product or the platform. But in the ops world, it tends to be like it's deployed, we ain't touching it ever again, or we will come back in a couple of years.
Well,
Yeah.
that leads to a previous conversation that we've had about technical debt, right?
Correct.
Because now we paid somebody to create a bunch of technical debt that we have to repay for to get cleaned up,
Right.
right?
Like,
So
All roads
incomplete
lead to
work.
technical debt.
yeah,
Incomplete
So-
work from consultants is you're paying triple, right? You paid to have it done the first time, you're paying to clean it up, and then you're paying to do it right after you've cleaned up after it,
yeah.
right?
And then sometimes
one
you
thing
pay
I wanna
again
say-
for documentation on the whole mess, right? So
Yeah. So the thing I want to comment about that idea of like in ops work, like minimum viable product is like a system that only functions some of the time. I'm a big proponent of like a more modern work style, even for ops people. At the end of the day, for ops, you have to deliver functional systems, right? Like it can't be like, well, it works 10% of the time. Like minimum
And
viable
stable.
product.
Stability tends to be king. Is like
Right.
you want something that works rock solid every time because your applications are riding upon my bedrock, and if my bedrock is god awful, then
Right.
your stuff's gonna
So-
be crazy.
Or,
What
but
I'll
on the
say
same
is-
at the same time, you can have a great foundation, right? Great foundation, and it works, but all the things that I need it to do have yet to be developed. well, I gave you a working product. It doesn't do everything you wanted, but it does work.
Right.
Well, and when are you finished? How do you know you're
So,
finished?
so what I'll say is like when you think about the process of delivering a system, as operations people, we very much tend to go down the route of we have to finish it all. But like if I'm setting up a system for a developer to develop against, I don't have to finish it all. If it crashes 50% of the time, as long as the developer's clear on that, good enough, right?
But the
Like,
expectation was set, right? You're not building a system
correct.
for a production environment where
Right.
uptime is king.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I look at the amount of effort that um, operations people put into systems that are never going to go into production because it might someday. And I go, okay, I get it. Like, you don't want to bake in tech debt, but as long as you're like, I think one of the things that we haven't done great as an operations world is been super clear with people like, this will never be production. And if you try to make it production, I'm just going to turn it off because
Yeah.
it was never intended to be production.
Unfortunately, you don't get to say that, and
Well,
it always ends
most-
up being production.
Yes.
Fortunately, I do.
So
what's that saying? Something will become a permanent fix or something like
There's
that.
I
no
got it.
such
Hold
thing as a temporary fix, right? So there's nothing more permanent than
Nothing more
There's
permanent
nothing
than
more
a temporary
permanent than a
solution.
temporary solution.
So
So this is the important thing, right? Like it's important to distinguish between something that is envisioned as a temporary solution and something that is envisioned as a stepping stone on the path to a solution, right?
right.
And as long as you are super clear about, because like the temporary solution bandwagon is like, well, can we just do this for now?
Oh man,
Like-
I hate that phrase.
Like,
so
oh, we're
much.
down production. Can we just fix it
that'll
for right
definitely
now?
stick.
Right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Hmm.
No, that's great.
But if
We're
it's
just
like-
gonna keep that forever.
Hey, I need to develop something. Can you provide me a resource so I can get the work done? I absolutely can. I'm going to turn it off tomorrow. And when they come back to you and say, you can't turn it off, like, I'm sorry, I told you I was going to turn it off tomorrow. I am a man of my word, and this is a development environment. And then you get their boss screaming at your boss, and your boss comes and screams at you and say, if we don't hold firm on this, we will have tech debt forever. And your boss goes, oh.
Mm-hmm.
And then he turns around and yells at their boss, and then things get better.
Yeah, and I would say, Chris, like it's a cultural thing for me because over in the dev world, they tend to be. I'm a big fan of rapid prototyping and laboratory, and it's like in the dev world, that's seems to be very much acceptable. In the ops world, it tends to be more like we want this temporary thing. We don't like people experimenting and testing out. We need it in prod now, and it's like it depends on the company for the most part for what I've seen, but overwhelmingly my experience has been we don't have time to test it. We need it now in prod. And
Which is
that's just like, oh, this
famous
is a
last
recipe for
words.
disaster. Yeah,
Famous last
exactly.
words, right? Like
And it's
you
like,
had the time to
oh.
develop the product, right? And now you want to shove it out, and you haven't given the infrastructure team time to develop the product, right? Like there is frequently this idea that infrastructure just exists, and
It's all the same. It doesn't matter.
it's
all fast,
parthenogenesis,
it's
right?
irrelevant. Mm-hmm.
It emerges fully formed from Zeus's head.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's not true. It just, and to allow that myth to continue is to do the entire industry a disservice.
Agreed. Because they don't. Sometimes everyone cares about the overlay, but very few people either care or know about the underlay and how much. Okay, cool. We're trying to support your insanely poorly designed app, and there is no way we can reasonably support this without a suicide mission. And
Right.
if you don't have good leadership and technical people that are in charge, it'd be like, hey, Travis, I see what you're trying to do. No. Like line in the sand or some sort of way of getting, I mean, it's supposed to be what DevOps is about. You have the mirroring and the merging of the two worlds. You develop stuff, I build infrastructure, support it, and somewhere in between we have fair compromises to make sure it runs well. That doesn't almost ever play out, which is kind of insane. At least in my experience, you guys probably have
Yeah.
more to say whether you got into work
So
or not.
I wonder if a lot of this, at least from the perception side, is kind of our own doing. I mean, because we all think we're Supermen, and we will make it happen.
Yeah.
Well, when we're always making it happen, when
Like
we're
Faith
always bending
Killing
over,
again?
and like, okay, fine, I will deliver this half-ass solution with half the resources and half the time that would actually take to do it right. We end up setting the expectation that that's the way things are always going to be.
Right.
I mean, we need to go back to the Scotty School of Engineering, or at least of estimating. This is going to take 2 weeks. Maybe I'll get it done in a week and be like, hey, I pulled a miracle and I got it done in a week. I mean, a lot of this
There's a
does
level-
have to be on us. I mean,
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a level of victims of our own success that I've seen personally, and know you guys probably have, is like by setting the example, or like, oh, you know, by either luck or extreme skill or hard work, you pulled a miracle. BioWare did this for a while. They called it the BioWare magic. Well, the magic was just slave labor before the product launches, so there's no magic there. But yeah, if you create a name for yourself, because that's what I wanted to do, is like, I'm the guy who comes in and cleans up shop. Well, yeah, the trick worked, and now everybody came to me with their absolutely, you know,
Their
stuff
messes,
circling
yeah.
their dumpster.
Go to the
fire.
garbage man and take out the trash.
Right.
Exactly.
Like, oh, that
So-
song's playing again. I know it's coming. I know it's coming.
you made sure you were known as that guy, and then got mad that you were known as that guy.
Right.
Yeah, because it just means like people are like, oh, I can be as reckless as I want. Travis will pull me out of the fire. It's like, dude, you are playing with absolute like suicide missions. Like, yeah, but you got me right, dog. I'm like,
I mean,
No.
I've
I have learned
You're
how,
juggling
over the
flaming
years, to just
chainsaws.
let them twist in the wind
At-
over stuff like
at
that.
the
You got
place-
yourself in a bind. You need to get yourself out. I am
Yep.
see,
sorry.
Rick, you're far better about that than I think a lot of ops people are, and I applaud you for it, right? Because like I heard managers at the place that you, me, and Brian used to work say about Brian, "Oh yeah, but that guy always answers the phone," right? Like it had just become this expectation that
it normalizes inhuman behavior.
we don't need more resources because that guy always answers the phone, right? Like,
Yep.
Yeah, I was the
That's-
guy that answered the phone at 3 a.m. because I was still up working.
Mhm.
Oh, can you kick my session real quick?
Mhm.
Yeah. All right, done. Try to log back in.
I use
Right.
the term mule is what I've been using. Is there's always a mule somewhere that's just the one that they whip, that does all the heavy work and doesn't usually complain. But I'm like, how do you break becoming the mule? Is that you start complaining. You're just like, or you do a DLC lock. It's like, oh, that's the extra Travis $10,000 subscription service that I will welcome
Yeah.
and sell you.
Yeah.
right? I am.
It's okay to be the guy that always answers the phone, right? Because I will answer my phone almost 24 hours a day.
Sure.
But if my phone rings, and I've trained people for decades on this, if you call me and I answer the phone, the place had better be burning down, right? There had better be a fire.
Yeah, you better have done a little bit of homework. There was
Yeah.
one issue
Mhm.
that was recently brought to me, and I was like, all right, we'll bring it up on. I knew what was coming, so I'm like, all right, we'll bring it up on this like team meeting or some damn thing like that. And they're like, they brought up that issue. They're like, yeah, did you take a look at that ticket? I said, yeah, I did. You know, what have we done with it so far? Crickets, absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
So you can't like just come to me.
Absolutely nothing, and none of it worked.
None of it works. So you can't. I mean,
We're out of ideas.
I
we
saw
got
the-
nothing left.
Yep.
I saw the ticket, and I forwarded it to you. Does that count? Yeah. No.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
No.
that's effort technically.
yeah.
MVP, minimum viable product.
There you
So-
go, yeah.
And like if they can get you to do work, I guess that is minimum viable product. Now the I forgot what I was going to say. It'll come back to me.
It was
Well, yeah,
probably
the-
brilliant.
The reward for working hard and efficient and effective is just a whole lot more work.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it, baby. Just
So,
Yeah, you end up
become
getting the scraps off everybody else's plates because
Mhm.
Yeah.
And to your
can't
point,
finish,
Rick,
so-
I mean that's always a like I don't mind necessarily being that guy, but I like there to be an understanding because like me coming from the military, I'm all about freedom. And if you're gonna say, okay, you got the on call, like, well, I like swimming, so I can't. Can I swim when I'm on call? Probably not. Can I go get hammered or get high or whatever I want
I
to
mean,
do?
yes,
Can I do that? No. Like, okay, well you're
Travis.
putting handcuffs on me, so
I'll tell you
what's the
what.
trade-off?
Yeah,
If
I've
you
done
don't-
a lot of Citrix work at 3 o'clock in the morning with only one eye. So
Right. If you don't know
We could tell
just how impaired you can be to do specific levels of work, you haven't worked in
Yes.
the industry long enough.
Yeah.
Well, let's just say I've tested a couple of those theories out, Chris, and I have found the theoretical maximum limit.
now you know.
It
So-
was fun.
now
So you have
yeah,
worked
you know
in
exactly
the industry long enough.
Experimentation works.
Yeah,
We have determined a exact level of blood alcohol content in my bloodstream in which I become non-functional.
Yeah.
Clint
I
Eastwood
had a
would be proud
recent-
of you because a man's got to know his limitations, and you have definitely defined where yours is at. So
I very recently had a member of my leadership team look at me while we were having drinks, like, "Hey, good thing you don't have any significant changes tonight." I'm like, I am nowhere near the point of not being able to do a significant change. And he's like,
Yeah.
like for software devs and other folks, they just don't get it. Like, you got to live your life. Yeah, I'm going to have a margarita at dinner if I'm going out for Mexican. And then I'm going to go home and I'm going to do a change. I might not do it after sucking down a pitcher in a half hour, but
No.
But you can go swimming, right? It depends on what the SLA is, right? On your on call, right? So if somebody calls and you're in the pool, but you haven't been in the pool for 2 hours, right? So most people, you go swim 15, 20, 30 minutes, whatever it is, and you get out of the pool, drive, look at your phone, and you return that call and say, okay, I've returned my call, or I've returned your call. If it's something that I deem that I need to take care of as an on-call person, I will get to it shortly.
Mhm.
so
I'm a fish,
This
so
is
I'm in
gonna
there
be
2
a li-
hours minimum, easily.
that?
this is going to be a little crude. But if you think about doctors who are on call and like lives are on the line, if the doctor gets the call and they're in the middle of relations with their wife, they're going to finish. Right? Like there's always margin for living your life,
Yeah.
no matter what.
That
Yeah, but see,
reminds
with
me-
that doctor, when lives are on the at stake, the Wi-Fi isn't down.
Mhm.
Guest wireless isn't down at one location, so clearly it's not as important.
right?
Fair enough.
Well, how
Fair
important is that guest Wi-Fi? Because they got to do that shopping on Amazon. It ain't going to do itself, Brian.
What else are you going to do while you're waiting for the doctor to arrive?
Mhm.
Exactly.
When
Critical
Shauna was
browsing.
born, the doctor came in, the on-call doctor came in, and I swear he walked out of Nice Ash Bar. Because
Mhm.
that's
Oh,
exactly what he
reeking.
smelled like. He smelled like liquor and nicotine. But
Nice.
he went and cleaned up and came in and delivered a healthy baby and was great about it. So, what are you going to do, right? To go back to Chris's statement, you know
Mhm.
what your limitations are, right?
Right.
So,
And,
Right.
and I think it's important that that's drawn out because I like to ask that whenever I'm doing interviews at companies. It's like, hey, do you have an on-call? What does it look like? What does it feel like? Because it's like, yeah, we have an on-call. It's for a week long. Okay, cool. What's it like? Oh, we call you at least 3 times a night. Like, oh, okay. Well, then we need to talk about what the compensation's going to look like because dumpster fire every night versus, hey, you might get a call once every 6 months. I'm like, okay, I can deal with that. But if you're going to lie about it and be like, oh, we have some on-call time, like, okay, and then you don't know until you're actually in that seat to find out what those on-calls look like and feel like.
Well,
This
and
is
if
how
the
I
dumpster's
summarize
starting
that
on fire every night, that's probably not a place you want to be, anyways.
no,
Because
Yeah.
clearly they have issues.
Yeah.
I mean,
You like dumpster fires?
well,
I like
you
the
are a
dumpster
fireman,
fires.
though, Brian.
Dumpster firefighter rates. You
Yeah.
can charge dumpster firefighter
You are the
rates.
firefighter in charge of eliminating dumpster fires. I mean, that's kind of what you do.
Yeah.
Well, if that's your
I
role,
don't know.
and usually
I'd
that
like
the
to
price
solve
tag goes
problems.
up quite a bit, right?
Yeah.
Right.
My
But I've
first
had
week on
tons of
call with
places
my
say
previous
like we
company.
have some issues, and then you go in like everything's on fire, and you're like, if I would have known this reality, I would have negotiated much more aggressively on my pay scale. And so now I have to either choose to be a complete asshole and be like, no, dog, this is not what we agreed on, or I can be the good little hero and just eat L's left and right by doing way too much work for people who are supposed to be better.
But
So
hopefully we have the capability of saying, okay, this, like, for example, my first week of on call at my previous company, I called every night, like 4 or 5 nights in a row. And by that fourth or fifth night, I was like, no, we're going to change this, because they would have these Seb 1 calls and got all these people on the phone. And I'm like, here is the problem. We're trying to run this Citrix app on these shitty Citrix servers over the network. It's really not designed for that. And we're having latency problems and all that kind of stuff. We're going to move this stuff locally. And the developers that were on the phone were like, nah, because then we have to update every server, individually and whatever when we update.
Don't care.
Like, I do not care. I've been called every night this week. You guys are going to fix this shit, and we're going to do it on the phone right now. And we sorted that stuff out right now. And that was the end of those calls. And then we had a guy that was working that was pretty good with that PowerShell stuff. And he figured out a PowerShell script that when they automatically do their updates, they update the code, drop it in this directory, it automatically updated all the Citrix boxes. So there's always a solution to these problems. They just didn't want to think about these things. So when the on-call thing, we have to actually take control of that kind of stuff as operations people, as engineers, and tell the company, this is unacceptable. We need to fix this. It is costing the company in manpower, in not necessarily money, because everybody's salaried these days. So it's costing in frustration and morale and all that kind of stuff. So it is on us to try to get that kind of stuff fixed. We should have the capabilities of getting stuff like that done.
And you got to
Burnout
prevent
is a
that from being
cost.
internalized too, right? Because that's what I've seen is a lot of people will take the L and either resign or leave. And I'm like, dude, you have to let leadership know. Let them know that the reason you left is because this place is a dumpster fire left over right. And so because I've seen a lot of people just internalize it. They'll take that the crappy gig, the extra work and whatever, and they're just like, thank you, may I have another? And I'm like, dude, no, like you are helping normalize this type of behavior. If the business doesn't feel the cost of their incompetence, they'll never change. And most people and teams will do the same.
Yeah, and sometimes businesses don't care. I mean, that's just a fact. They don't care. They just, whatever, we'll just hire somebody else. But I think you're right. On the exit interview, when you've had enough, you need to say, this is why I'm leaving, right? And don't worry about burning a bridge, because if you're leaving, chances are you're leaving for a reason and you don't want to come back.
Well, nothing you say in an exit interview should be a surprise.
No.
If it is,
agreed.
That's on you already. So
yeah.
Uh,
I think it's kind of unfair. Like if you do a surprise birthday party on the way out, like
there's no such thing as a 100% statement.
No.
But in general, I will agree with you.
Typically, at least as far as I know, in my experience, the exit interviews were always done by people that were not the people that you directly reported to.
Correct.
Right. So when you talk to those people, HR or the director of whatever, and you say, "Oh, I'm leaving because of this, this, and this, and this," and they're like, "I didn't know all these things were going on." Well, number one, it's your fault for not talking to your managers. It's my manager's fault for not talking to his superiors. But it's also on me for letting myself get to the point where I am unhappy with the guy or lady I work for, and not going around that person and letting somebody else know that there's been a problem, right? So there's plenty of I don't want to say blame, but there's still plenty of responsibility all the way around. It's still upon me to let the business know this is a problem, and I shouldn't have to wait for my manager to do it. I should be able to do it myself, right? I might get fired for it, but then again, if that happens, I don't want to be there anyway.
Yeah. Plus, you'll probably be lionized in the community anyways, because I put some people on blast for the raw deal that I was getting from a crappy company that I interviewed for. I'm like, screw it, put them on blast. Like, I'm never gonna work there. They don't offer any vacation. Like, bye, burn that bridge. If you truly want a place to become better, yeah, speak up, speak early, and if you get, like you said, Rick, if you get fired from it, maybe it's just a shitty place anyways, and they deserve this, and you never
Right.
should work for there again.
Have any of you people ever left a job and wanted to go back? Ever?
No.
Oh, I
Hell
mean,
no.
there's nostalgia about things, but
Well, I did go back one time. It was probably one of the worst decisions I've ever made. Right?
Because none of the problems, it was like you got all these fucking repressed memories that are all coming back to haunt you that never were fixed when you were gone anyways.
I actually hired somebody and within like a week or two I left, and when I went back that person was my boss. So that became kind of a weird issue to start with. So it was probably it wasn't a very smart thing to do. I should not have gone back, but
Yeah.
Well, I do like the idea of, like, let's call it second chances, but the usually, I should say overwhelmingly the times, if anyone's going to change, it's usually by the old guard leaving, like basically a cleaning of the shop. The entire team is moved on, they have a new members, and the culture did not continue on forward. Because I try to kill culture wherever I can. Like,
wasn't the case
if it's
that time,
garbage,
was it,
I'll
Chris?
kill it.
Yeah, that's Travis, you just mentioned a really good point. Like you can, I've noticed as I've gotten more experienced, in my career that like you pick up real quick on those culture like thorns. And yeah, you should find various ways to really like stomp that out you should come in there like that Vince McMahon gif when he's fucking waltzing down the thing. Like you should come in with your balls hanging out. You're like, no, this is the way it's going to be.
Yeah, and it takes a particularly, I mean, I do it, but I understand why other people don't do it because they're scared. But I'm like, I will tear every last cable in this place down to its bare wire and to change this crap.
Yeah.
I do not care. Fire me if you don't want to, but as long as I'm here, if this toxic culture exists, my only job is to wrench this engine every day until you change.
Yeah.
Fire me if you want to. I
Usually
don't
it's
care.
not that if you can like do it in a receptive way.
Yeah.
Usually you'll get people supportive because everyone else is probably just afraid to do anything because they've been beaten down for years.
I've had multiple people, I'll say something publicly at like one of our team meetings or something, and I've almost always had someone be like, thank you for saying something. I'm like, well, thanks for letting me stand alone. I didn't enjoy that. Jesus, man. Yeah, as I'm sitting there being, crucified and strung up, we're like, hey, man, a little support would be nice, guys. These nails hurt.
Yeah.
Well,
or at least you didn't have to take a jab
I'm not
too.
enjoying this.
When it was your turn with the spear, you could have dropped it or something. Or not.
You could at least
Not
pretend like
gone
it
for it.
slipped out of your hand instead of joining in on the knifing.
right? Did my back hurt your knife? Really?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So let's bring it back around. Cleaning
Yeah,
up
we
after
got a little
consultants and
off
MSPs. It's important
We're all
stuff
about
to
staying on
discuss,
topic here.
right?
You never.
Yeah.
But let's start with how much should you trust your consultants?
Can I? Let me put in a little interjection because I like the framing in general, but having been mostly the full-time, the W-2 employee or whatever, can we talk about the other side of the equation? Or like, should we trust the MSPs and consultants? I'm like, I've seen a lot of full-time people that I wouldn't trust with an ice cream cone. And it's like they use the consultants as a punching bag, and I'm like, dude, that's not cool. It's not their fault that you suck.
Like, should the consultant trust their customer?
Yeah, like firing your client, or addressing those issues.
So that's been done.
What I've seen, like I've seen people fire customers, but more often what I've seen is they price customers out of being customers. Right? Like most businesses are always willing to take more money. Actually, at the place that I started working with Rick at, we had a customer who I unaffectionately referred to as Crazy Culottes. And my opinion was whatever this person requested, we should make sure that we quoted like triple
Mm-hmm.
and make it like flat fee.
Mm-hmm.
And we just eventually the crazy person moved on and found a new MSP to pick on.
New patient to torture.
Right.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Chris, because I don't know, like when I first came over to IT, I was working at Cambia, and there was a lot of like garbage there that got treated as a contractor. But I went from making 33K a year to 96K, and I was like, is this bullshit worth it? And like for the first time in my life, yeah, it is. So, at least for a while, right? And so as the bullshit meter rises, then your pay rises. It's like, as long as I can keep those kind of matched, all right. Like if it becomes too much bullshit and not enough money, okay, well I leave.
Right.
Ideally, it's a ton of money and no bullshit, but that's like fantasy land, so I've discounted that.
I mean,
Well, I wish I made that kind of money.
eventually you become Taylor Swift.
It's the work equivalent to like the crazy hot scale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm, exactly.
Yeah.
This like ultra hot and no crazy. It's like, that's a unicorn. Yeah, don't even think about that. It's like, it's absolutely perfect.
I mean, unless you are up to that task, right?
Mhm.
You also have to be crazy hot and zero actual crazy. And then like you got a shot at that unicorn.
Mhm.
Yeah, and
If
if
you're
you
a
find
wizard-
one and they're interested, you put a ring on it.
Yeah. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Put ring on immediately.
Yes. Yeah, get on your knees.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But yeah, I, there's always that balance. I think
Yeah.
that's always like prevalent, and it's true with whether it's you're as an MSP or a consultant or a contractor. Like you have, I think there should be always a healthy balance in a relationship between the two. And I don't like it when, as a full timer, I see people complaining about contractors or consultants or MSPs, and they're like, "Oh, these guys, blah blah blah, they did a bad job." And like, look what you gave them, dude. That system was busted. And they made it salvageable. Like, you got to they polished the turd the best they could, and you got to take some responsibility that you gave them an absolutely disgusting turd.
So what if you come
no
into
way.
an environment, Travis, where you come into an environment where they have actually created that turd?
Mm-hmm.
Right now what do you do? Right? They
Yeah.
know it. It's their turd that needs to be polished. Who do you have do it? Do you tell them? Oh, do you flush it? Do you make them fix it? Do you fix it yourself? I'm kind of.
Are you talking like the contractor consultants made it
Yeah.
and then they came back?
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
I have explicit experience in that, and yes, I did.
I replaced a guy
Mhm.
who had consultants come in and do whatever because he didn't know how to do it, and they came in and they do a lot of stuff, and they created a really big, shiny, fat turd,
Mhm.
right? /16s and a couple of /8s. Yeah, up for the network, some really weird stuff going on, and stuff going like we were speaking about before. Whereas I'm getting billed every month, right? I changed the firewall passwords last September. Changed them, got rid of accounts that I didn't see any value in having.
Mhm.
2 of the 3 companies that are contracted to watch out for network stuff still to this day have yet to call me and say, "Hey, you locked us out of the firewalls. What's going on?"
Yeah.
So
Maybe they're
It's
not
been
being
like
so
9
monitory
months.
after all.
yeah,
Yeah.
So here's this big steaming turd, right? I mean, that's why this conversation started for me when we were talking about it a month ago or a month and a half ago, whatever it was.
Mhm.
That's what spurred this on, and I'm kind of I'm having a frustrating time trying to get through this because there are contracts, and I'm trying to get these guys to do work or whatever. And I'm about to throw my hands up and go with a contractor I know out of Michigan and say, just come in and just fix it. Let's just get it fixed and move on. And when contract time comes on for the other guys, they just lose. Sorry.
Yeah,
Done.
and your company probably isn't big enough where you can just say, "Well, I'm just going to take these contracts to legal, and we're
It's
getting
not
out
worth
of these."
It's
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm saying.
Mhm.
Even though there's probably plenty of examples of blatant breach of contract.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And some of the
It's just not
stuff,
worth it.
one of them's doing some of the stuff that I simply don't want to do. And they are doing it. It's
Yeah.
just I never hear about any issues or whatever. they patch our Windows environment, the servers and all our workstations and whatever. And once a month, I might get a report on how that went. Usually I know it's done because the servers will get rebooted when they shouldn't or whatever. And Chris is shaking his head
Well,
I was just waiting for the other
hold them
shoe to drop.
accountable.
yeah. And trust me, yeah, because they did, that not too long ago, Microsoft put out this patch that broke trusted boot if you were running in a VMware environment, and like 8 of my servers wouldn't boot. Right.
Mhm.
I get called at 4:00 in the morning when people start showing up to work and they can't log in and whatever. So, and I was
That's
furious, and yeah, they got an earful over it. But again, I have a contract. I don't know if I can consider that breach of contract and fire them, because it was kind of a mistake that was made. But they didn't take the time to log in to see if whatever it is they did was actually a good or bad thing. Right. So they just ran the patch and moved on.
And I think that kind of speaks to I don't know, stuff that I always try to do as usually the internal guy is like, every time I work with a contractor, if I can, I'm like, what is their scope of work? What are the things they will do? What are the things that they won't do? And then like what is our metrics for them? It shouldn't be I wait until the very end of the project and then evaluate. It's like there should be stepping stones or checkpoints or whatever the term people want to use to be like, okay, we're at phase 1 of phase 3. We're at the end of it. Let's check to make sure, how are we doing on time, resources? Did we get the thing that we wanted at this checkpoint? And if I see most places won't do that, or they a lot of the leadership and management simply are not technical enough, because people will be like, things are good, and they're like, all right, check's done. I'm like, no. Take a look at it. See the documentation. Yeah. If it exists, look at it. Test the backup. Like, there should be functional things that you can test out to make sure that we're at a checkpoint that we can say, yep, checkpoint 1 is good, ready for 2, roll forward. Or you can be like, yeah, you guys suck, you're fired. We didn't wait till like a year down the road and now we're in a pickle.
Right.
So it's incumbent
if
upon
contractors
management.
are acting in a vacuum, there's wrong things happening on both sides. That shouldn't be the case. But
and I find it tends to be
often
both sides. If there's a company that doesn't check on the contractors, they also really don't check on the FTEs. And so it tends to be just like cats chasing their own tails, running around, and eventually sometimes they touch, and then something magically good or magically bad happens. Yeah.
Right. The other thing that I think that you need to pay attention when you're vetting like a new contractor or consulting firm or whatever is you need to be realistic about timelines. Like if you're hiring somebody to do a project, like, okay, who's working on it? Awesome. What's their allocation? When are they actually going to be able to work on this? Right. And if the answer is like, as long as you sign right now, they've got 2 weeks. Okay, fine. But then like, you also need to understand like, okay, they've got 2 weeks, but then you're going to see them for an hour over the subsequent 6 months. Maybe not so awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So
and there's a difficulty, and I really understand it, again, having mostly full time, to see contractors or people or consultants come in, with these, you're competing with other consultant companies or contractors, and so you have to give a good value proposition when you do your bid. And sometimes people act in bad faith, where like Chris, you would do a great job at whatever company I'm at. You offer fair rates and a reasonable timeline, but then somebody else comes in and is like, whatever he's offering, I'll do it in half. And it's like, oh, that's a great deal. And then you find out, turns out that person can't exactly deliver what they promised. And they got in the door, and then they kind of add rates and little add-ons. Oh, well, it's actually going to be a little extra now. And that was their plan the whole time.
Oh, yeah, that's going to be a contract change. That's
oh man. Oh, you didn't get the premium account, Brian. Sorry, I can't. Darn it.
So, my hands are tied. I mean, Microsoft makes me do it this way. I have to bill you for it.
I'm not acting in bad faith. I'm trying my best.
So what I have seen with that is that customers leave good companies all the time. Good companies get customers back, and good customers never leave twice. right? Like,
Yeah.
everybody's tempted by the shiny, right? And until you learn your lesson, you're going to be tempted by it. The good companies are the ones that learn their lesson and go, you know what? I found a good contractor for good rates. I've been burned once. I'm never going to ruin that again, right?
Mhm.
The dumb companies are always chasing that, and they go out of business.
Yeah, I
You
call them
know?
the Google clones more often than not because they'll try to copy what the good guys are doing, but they won't understand why it works. It's like, why
Right.
do foosball tables work? It's like, because people like playing foosball. It's like, no, because their culture appreciates not slave driving. They have time to play with each other and goof off a little bit.
Correct.
You don't allow that. You have the foosball table in the middle of the conference room, and if you know it's got all glass around it, so if you even touch that table, your ass is grass. Don't even look at that table.
You
But
got
we
time
have
to play
we have a table.
foosball. Is all your work done?
Yeah, immediately you'll get like managers like, hey, why are you playing that foosball? You done with our work? You know, we gave you 8 hours of work for 2 hours. Get it done. Like,
Right.
it's the part that sucks about like when I sympathize with contractors and consultants in that way because I've done it a little bit, but it's like, yeah, you're competing with someone who's operating in bad faith and you lost a ticket or whatever. It's like, this is not fair. Like, you do good work, they do crappy work, and they knew they couldn't cut it, but such
Right.
is the path.
Yep.
But yeah, that was a good point. That it's people will leave. The grass is greener on the other side, and if it actually is a good company or team, they'll be like, or customer, like, I made a mistake. I'm gonna come back and stick the landing for a while.
Right. Yeah. And of course, when I am responsible for vendor management, um, I've got really clear rules and I have a good sense for like what's reasonable pricing. Um, I've totally had people come to me and say, "Oh, we should competitive bid these people." I'm like, "We can, but we're not going to leave." And like, "Well, what do you mean?" I'm like, "Their rates are reasonable. Like, I keep an eye on these things, right? And they do good work. Maybe it's not the best work, but it's good work. The devil you know, man."
Yeah.
I think there's
Don't
always like a value proposition too. I've had a lot of really good vendors. And to be fair, even Cisco, as much as I complain about them, they're usually good about, hey, you've ordered this very expensive thing. Here's all the training for it. We can get you set up, and we'll get you in the pilot seat so you can drive it. We'll have a lab, you know. And good companies and vendors will do that or explain the benefits. Like, here, you're in the basic version. Here's the benefits of premium. It may not entirely apply to your org or team. It could benefit you, but here's the things to consider, and then you make a decision on whether you want to commit to the price or not. I like that model. It's like, hey, it's your choice of whether you think it's a good fit, but here's the pros, here's the cons. You decide.
I mean,
Hmm.
the best companies are the ones that come to you and say, "Hey, I see that you're buying X and Y, but if you go ahead and buy Z, you're going to get all of X and Y at the level that you need it for half the price." And they're like, "You don't need to pay us more money.
Mm-hmm.
Get the product you need for the price that's right, and don't go any further." Right? And when a vendor is watching out for you, that's a good sign.
Yeah,
So
because
you
they're
have,
not just
and
trying to line their pockets. They're actually trying to deliver value to you in a way that makes sense.
that's what I want out of my MSPs. That's
Yep.
precisely what I want out of my MSPs.
Well,
And
we were talking about this last week, and the idea of like, as an MSP, I totally would manage other contracts for some of my customers.
Hmm.
And if you're going to trust your vendor to do that, they have to be somebody that's demonstrated they're looking out for you and for your bottom line. So yeah, that's what I want out of my MSPs too. So what about how do you make the trade-off, everybody, between good versus expedient? Because sometimes just getting it done is important.
I differentiate between, it really comes down to like culture of the company that I'm working at, because if I prefer good always, expedient, assuming, and this is goes back to your guys saying, is like get it done fast. I'm like, okay, can I tear it back down when we're done so I can build it right eventually? If the answer is no, we'll never let you change it, then the culture is get it done, we'll never change. But if there's we understand this was a prototype, it got it technically past the hump. Now that we're past the sort of dumpster fire, let's take some time to
Rebuild
build
it right.
right.
Yeah.
I think the place where I would go with expedient versus good is for the CEO's desk chair. Because like they're not going to like it, but then they're going to understand for a long time why they shouldn't just ask for fast. Like, hey, here's your desk chair. This thing is awful. Yes, it is. You wanted it as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I
You
didn't
got it as
mean
fast
this.
as
Like,
possible.
Yeah.
you meant
And
good.
I've noticed like front end is always a thing that I have to be careful with. Is like, and I've heard this from a couple of devs. Maybe you can vouch for this, Chris. Is like get the back end done first and wait for the front end until the very, very last minute. Make your front end look like crap until the back end's ready. Because if the front end looks good, then leadership, C-suite, management people will be like, "Oh, it looks good, therefore it's done." And I'm like, "Uh-oh."
Oh no. Well, and if you want to prevent having to rewrite a shit ton of your front end, you kind of want to get your back end at least mostly in shape, so shit's not going to be changing
Yeah.
too much.
Yeah, I mean, there's some wisdom to that. It's the make it painful until they've selected what you want.
Yeah.
Right? It's tough to be disingenuous for a lot of people, right? Like, well, yeah, I could make a better front end, but I'm trying to sell them on it. Nobody wants to do that. The other thing, like the counter argument to that is like, if you make the front end just complete crap while you're working on the back end, there is a point in time where the executive is like, this thing sucks, cancel the project.
Yeah. There's definitely a balance, and I didn't mean like
Yeah.
completely gimp your front end. Just don't let the front end get too far ahead of your back end, because then front end looking done means project done as far as anybody else is concerned. Overwhelming.
That just sounds naughty, Travis.
It is.
It's like don't lean out
Want your
too
front
far.
end to be done before your back end.
My wife tells me that all the time. I never get it. I think she's talking about software, but I mean, who knows?
She is talking about software, and that's the problem.
And that's the
Mhm.
problem.
Oh.
Well, the divorce is coming soon. All right, had a good run, guys.
No, the
That's
what is
hilarious.
it? Don't let your head get too far out over your knees, right? Like
Mhm.
keep it in balance.
Yeah.
But I hear you. Like there's a case to be made for like, you know what? Don't just focus on the new shiny, right?
Mhm.
Focus on the nuts and bolts. Build good.
And that's kind of like the holistic approach, right? If you're going to add something into a system, it's like, all right, let's make sure we double check the other systems that are, let's say foundational to this. So, something as simple, I'm a big fan of tying Active Directory to login. So you're not using create users, you just assign groups. And then AD membership, it's basically RBAC. But it's like, all right, if I want to do RBAC, I need to make sure Active Directory is stable and functional. If it's not, I cannot do RBAC effectively. Or if the people managing it are really bad at it. So it's like, there's limits to even that. Of like, okay, I would like to do RBAC, but I can't. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So what else? What else do we want to talk about? Do we want to talk about horror stories of cleaning up after consultants and MSPs?
That's all I've been doing.
There's
Sorry.
this guy,
Jesse
Brian
probably
V,
has
has
a
been
couple.
working, and God, he just makes garbage. I have to clean up all his crap. Brian's probably got
Because
stories
Jesse,
on
you
his
guys
side.
have acquired some companies that were previously basically ran by MSPs that you had to ingest. Oh,
Someone.
You have no audio.
Oh, I never hit the unmute. Talking over here.
Ah, there you go.
There we go.
He's wondering why we're not responding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably the biggest horror story I have, not cleaning up after MSP, but dealing with an MSP. I think Brian's heard this story a couple times, is dealing with phone vendors.
Oh, God.
Because
Oh,
generally, even
No.
for large corporations, you don't have like an in-house, like someone who's directly certified to support the phone system you're on. Because you have to be certified in Avaya, Mitel, Genesis, pick your flavor. Usually you don't have, unless I guess if you're like really big, you might have a guy on staff for that, probably paying a lot of money for it. But usually your phone system is outsourced. The support is outsourced. You may add users and phones and stuff, but usually it's outsourced. And that's probably the worst. Definitely almost got fired over it. Horror story of dealing with an MSP.
Well, and that's actually a good point, Jesse. Because I mean, we share the same thing. I do unified comms and voice from time to time.
Oh, you.
Yeah.
You're the enemy.
Well, it's always funny because it's one of those. I always call it the hot and cold cycle. Either people don't give two flying fucks about it, or it's everything, and it's nowhere in between. And when you have MSPs or people working on those systems, the vast majority, because I've been told by even many network people, are like, "Oh, voice, it's just networking. Like there's no extra to it." And I'm just like, "Okay, dog." But and then when someone shows the voice stuff, they're like, "Oh, I get it. It's got IP addresses and subnets and gateways, so it's good." It's like they don't understand. So when an MSP rolls in, we'll do your voice for you. Nobody has any idea how it works. So here's our done voice stuff, and they're like, "Looks good." And me and you look at it and be like, "Dude, this sucks. This is trash."
And there's so much momentum built up. Technology is still, relatively young. I mean, voice networks and packet switch networks started bleeding together like in the, late 80s, 90s, something like that. And there's still those guys around who remember when voice networks were separate. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of momentum built up about the rules of the voice network don't necessarily align with the rules of a packet switch network. And when the network guys, that trajectory with the collide with the phone system guys on the network, where the rubber meets the road, where those two need to work in harmony. Well, I've been there, and it's not a lot of fun, to tell you the truth. And that's where I did develop a kind of a passion for VoIP, like voice on packet switch networks. But I subsequently developed a equally strong passion for hating phone system guys about PBXs and how they're written and how their TCP stacks are written. And it's all fucked up. It's all sorts of messed up.
Yeah, I don't do PBXs. I just do the voice network component because I hate those guys with a passion because they'll make absolute trash. Hey Travis, my phone's not working. Is the voice network down? Like, dude, your server's crashed, a-hole.
Yeah.
Go fix that. Oh yeah, I forgot to manually fail it over.
The famous question for the networking guys: is there something wrong with the network?
Yes.
I can't reach my server.
You know what?
Crashed.
To be fair, though, system guys do that shit too, Chris.
Oh
True.
yeah, no.
Oh yeah.
So
my server's not working.
I've done it to Brian and been slapped upside the head a couple of times.
Yeah. No, I totally became towards the end of my time working with Brian, I became the de facto filter for Brian, because legitimately people did not like to go. Brian had made it very clear, like, don't come to me with dumb questions. So they'd come to me with dumb questions for Brian.
So you were his secretary / filter.
I was his, what I like to think of is as his anger translator.
Mhm. What?
And what they'd be like, hey, could there be something wrong with the network? And I'd be like, I'd look at the question they were asking, and I'd be like, no. And they'd be like, well, can you ask? I'm like, I can. The answer is going to be no.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
they're like, well, go ahead and ask. So I would send a message to Brian, and I'd say, hey, I appreciate what the answer is going to be to this question, but do you see anything at all going on with the network that could explain XYZ symptom? And the beautiful thing about Brian is he would always respond back with, have you looked at this? And he'd
Mhm.
ferret out a reasonable path forward that had nothing to do with the network because he's a good troubleshooter and a team player. I don't know why people didn't like talking to him. Other than they
People don't like
often,
hearing the truth. That's
well,
the reality. They don't
Well,
like
and they
hearing
don't,
the truth.
Brian
Yeah.
will absolutely tell you the truth, right?
absolutely.
And not hold anything back. And I don't understand why a lot of people didn't like that, because he wouldn't do it in a way that made you feel stupid
Right.
unless you had that coming.
Mhm.
Because if
Well,
you had it
even
coming,
then-
it would definitely make you feel stupid, right? But
It was only a select few that he was willing to make feel stupid when they deserved to feel stupid.
so
Most people got pretty kid gloves.
and then
from him.
on the rare occasion that it was a network problem, if you could prove it to him and succinctly say, here is the issue, this is what's causing the issue, and I was able to successfully do that one time in my career with Brian, and say, there's, Jumbo Frames is messed up on your network switch.
Mhm.
You need to fix that. And once it was fixed, it was done. We're completely done. We're all my troubles went away. So Brian's real good at that stuff, and he's real fair about it until you become unfair about it, right?
Right.
Then
Like,
you're going to have two avenues of, you're going to have two places to shit from, because he's going to tear you one.
legitimately
Here's
so, though.
something I'd be curious on your guys' thoughts on this. So, me coming from military, especially doing elite search and rescue, I was very shocked coming into the civilian world at the sheer amount of cowardice that I see at all levels, especially in management and leadership and C-suite. Like, people are terrified to just say, not even cruelty, just like, hey, Travis, the system's broken. They're like, hey, is there any way we could maybe take a look at this thing? And it's like, dude, just you don't have to come at me all vicious, but you also, like, just tell me the truth. And there's a high degree of cowardice just to say fundamental truths, like, not even like, hey, Rick, your system's broken. It's like, hey, Rick, I think there's some issue with this thing, or the system is down. Just definitive things. People are terrified to do it.
So what I'll say is that there is a difference in the military versus like the civilian world, in that when a superior comes to you in the military and says, hey, is there something going on? You're not at risk of being fired, right? Like, they don't really
Sometimes.
fire people. They might
Yeah.
change your job description. They might do something else, but they're not going to change. Like, you're not getting kicked out unless you've done something illegal or incredibly stupid, right? You're going to have a job tomorrow. In the corporate world, when they come at you with truth, there is, because of long habit, an implication that your job is on the line. And because of that, people get really defensive really quickly. And the antidote to that over years has become kind of pussyfooting around issues.
Yeah. And because I've seen that, we had a guy, he was I liked him. He was a network engineer at a previous company, and he left. It was at a going away party, and our director, who was also the operating or acting manager, asked him, hey, is there you're on the way out, any things that you could, criticize, anything to do better, whatever. And the dude gave the most softball answer. Well, we could have done a little bit better at the culture here. And then dude immediately, like, all the other members of the team were there, and he just snapped back. He's like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. Everything's great here. Blah, 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 blah. And it was like, that was the message. Like, you shot the messenger, and you did it in front of everybody else.
Right.
This is the message, is
You
don't
didn't
you
wanna hear
dare
the
say
answer, don't
bad
ask the
things.
question.
Right.
Right? That's just,
Thin-skinned leadership is what I see all over. I'm like, dude, you have absolutely no balls. I don't respect you even an inch because you can't even admit just a simple truth, let alone take criticism. It's not a good look to me. I immediately disrespect those people because it's like, you're not worth respecting. You're in charge of all these people. They rely on you to just call out realities, not even harshly. And if you can't do that, you're unfit for leadership or command, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, having the fortitude to be honest and at the same time to support your people and to help them develop. Because that's the other thing. Like, if you're going to call stuff out, you got to be willing to back that up. Like, if you're going to ask the question, hey, why did this happen? When the answer is like, I don't know how to do my job. As a leader, your job at that point is to make it so they know how to do their job. It's not to fire them. It's not to find the new person, right? You come at them with honesty. If they come back to you with honesty, you've got the basic component of a good relationship there, right? Like two people being honest with each other, barring like real mental deficiency.
Well, that kind of opens up the
invest.
question, right? And that comes back whether it's FTE or contractors or MSPs. Where we talk about trust is like, where's the point of no return? Because if I come to you and I'm working for you, Chris, I'm like, hey, you hired me as a network engineer. News alert, I don't know anything about networking, and be like, well, we're at a bit of an impasse or a crossroads.
So,
do I try to teach you and train you, or do I boot you out and get someone who can?
So this is the difference between FTE and actually no. If you come to me and say you hired me and I don't actually know what I'm doing, you have broken trust, right? Like, yeah, you came to me and were honest later, and I applaud you for having enough stomach pains about what you've done to eventually come clean. Like that bodes well for you in the future. But
there's probably a process to get there, right? Of lying to like, no,
right.
I can totally hang. I got this. No problem.
Right. Like, you know what? If I pull up outside of Home Depot and say, hey, anybody looking for work? And they get in the car and I'm like, awesome, you're my new network engineer. And they say to me, I don't know anything about networking. Okay, great. We've got a place we can start from. But if like I pull up to like if I drop
Depot?
in on
Network Engineer Depot.
Right. And
just pick one up on the way home.
Actually, famously, if I go through a headhunter or an employment agency, right? And I'm like, I'm looking for a network person. Like, we got the person for you. And they present somebody to me and they show up and like, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. I might keep that person, but I'm not keeping the agency. Right? Like,
yeah.
Once you break trust, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice.
Right.
Because that actually happened recently. It was maybe a couple of months ago now. There was a contractor that had been hired, and this person was talking to me asking, well, how do I, they're in the firewall trying to manage new rules or like delete stuff or add things in. And what they were trying to do was like kind of crazy. And I'm like, what are you like trying to delete an object? But when they did, Palo Alto and then Panorama, it says, hey, you can't delete this object because it's attached to, rules. She's like, why does it keep fighting me? And I'm like, how much experience do you have in these firewalls? And
did you read the message?
Yeah, it literally would say, hey, it's because it's in these rules. I'm like, what is it? The message is literally telling you because it's in rules. So you got to go, edit those rules. Also, why am I teaching you? I'm not an instructor. I'm not a manager. I'm a leader. And so eventually, some bad things happened that was discovered. But apparently on their resume was like, yep, dog, I got this. I'm good with Palo Alto firewalls. And it's like, this test determined that was a lie, and bad things happened. A large amount of any rules had been created, and a little bit of let's say a kerfluffle occurred. But it was also just And as soon as I saw that, I talked to my manager. I was like, yeah, I'm not so sure this person should be on this particular skill set because I'm not getting a warm and fuzzy of anything. And I got the hand wave like, oh, they're fine. I'm like, oh, all right, you know, security incident inbound. So, and,
Yep.
and then and that's the sucky thing about being a full timer. You have contractors. Again, no disrespect meant, but you can do crazy shit. And then I get the call at midnight. It's like, yeah, all that crazy shit that they did. Oh, it's kind of coming to a head right now. Can you fix everything? It's like only, and I tell people like only if I get their paycheck. I get all their paycheck.
At my work, we call that the seagull treatment, where you swoop in, you shit all over the place, and you're gone before anybody knows what happens.
Oh, that harkens back to one of our
Seagull
earliest episodes.
I think we've talked about that.
Yeah, the
earlier
seagull
on.
change.
The
Yeah.
seagull,
I like
the
that,
seagull
man.
change. You come in, you shit all over the place.
I've never heard the phrase, but I've been the victim of it a couple of times.
Oh yeah, we've all.
Yeah,
been
we're
the
just like
victim of
sitting there, Rick, and we're like just got the crap all over our face. We're like, what happened? This person got
What?
paid? What?
All I did was sit down at my desk and yeah, what the hell? Oh yeah.
Yep.
I'm gonna use that. That's good. Seagull treatment. That hurts my insides, but it's funny.
I've got some management meetings, some executive meetings coming up that phrase is going to be used.
Don't seagull me, man.
Well, I think maybe the funny thing or the sad thing, and maybe you've seen this, Rick, is like when that happens, I'm usually the one like, hey, we just got, I'll use seagull treatment now. Like we got just all shit on, and they're like, okay, that's why we're gonna hire him again. Like, do you hate me? Because I believe you hate me at this point. I told you they came in and wrecked my shit, and you're like, let's bring them back. I'm like, I consider that a professional middle finger. It's like, yeah, go deal with it. This is what I think of you. Go clean up the mess.
That's the original, like, well, they promised they wouldn't do it again.
Yeah. Isn't that
Right.
the abusive relationship?
Where else
I'll
have we heard
change.
that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Oh, tuna casserole. Just
Bill Burr's kid. Take my
it's one
day
of
out
my-
on you.
Right. It's one of my favorite analogies for businesses, right? Like, are you in a bad relationship? Are you the girlfriend in the abusive relationship? Because if you are, you got three ways out, right? Either he loses interest, you wise up, or you die.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. And
And
like,
I
like,
think
oh,
we should
they'll
take that
change.
route.
Nope.
Yeah. I've worked at a couple of companies where I'm like, okay, I stick around purely as a social engineering experiment. It's like, all right, you've been dunked on 7 times. Is the 8th one going to be the charm to like, oh, I think these guys might be a little bit bad faith actors? Or is it going to be like, just watch the cycle? And, if I can stay back and watch the train wreck slowly and have popcorn, like, I'll do that. But usually I'm in the blast radius. So I'm like, oh, man, here it comes. It's got to like, they're going to finish the project on Tuesday. Well, guess who's taking PTO on Tuesday through Friday? This guy.
Yes. So I'm going to come back to how much should you trust your consultants or your contractors or whatever. The way I would summarize it is I trust my contractor, consultant, MSP, whatever, as much as they will let me, right? So if you're willing to meet with me and disclose information to me, if you're honest to me about your capabilities up front, you're going to start with a level of trust, right? If you continue to be worthy of that trust, I'm going to give you a lot. But if you start at a place that's like overall dishonest or causes me to be skeptical, then yeah, I'm going to ride you like a pony at the Kentucky Derby, right? Tight, hard, and fast until you prove to me otherwise.
And there needs to be some level of like you said, I mean, the trust kind of works both ways, and there needs to be a level of like, okay, and honesty, particularly for me, again, on the FTE side, is like, what did we give them, and what are we reasonably going to be able to expect from them? Because if I gave you an absolute dumpster fire turd, and I'm like, hey, Chris, make this, the shiny, perfect kingdom that I wish, and you're like, no. Or here's the price tag, here's the timetable to
Right.
to convert that frog back into a prince,
Well, it's
And
never here's our turd. It's always, we've got a system and we'd really like to bring it up to date. We'd like it to be shiny and new.
we want some help. I always want help.
Right.
That's the term I always hear. Yeah.
If it's not a as soon as I hear those things, like as a consultant, my first question would be, what's your price tag? Like, what's your budget?
Yeah.
Right. You want perfect? You wouldn't be coming to me if it were like $5 away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, for you guys who've been in doing, consultant type of work, contractor things, what are your red flags for a client? Kind of reversing the question just a little bit. Like, what are your signs you're like, oh, this is a trap. I gotta say no to this client, or I gotta, maybe add in extra price, extra time, blah blah blah. What's your red flags?
If you sit down at a meeting when you're trying to earn that client's business, and that client spends most of the time trying to do these gotchas, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then there's these guys that they may or may not, but they think they know about a lot about computers and whatever, and networking and this and that and the other. And they spend most of the interview trying to get you, like, I can prove you wrong kind of thing. Those are the people that I want to avoid like crazy. If I was back doing MSP work or back doing consulting or whatever, I would just say, you know what? I don't think I'm the right guy for you. I don't think this is the right company for you. Thank you for your time, and be on my way. That's because they're not looking for a partner. They're looking for somebody to tell them they're looking for somebody that they can tell what to do. Right.
Yeah, it kind of feels like a punching bag at that point.
Tell them what to do. I'm there to provide a service, and I'm going to charge what I'm going to charge, and that guy is going to bitch about, well, I know how to do this stuff. Why should I pay you to do? Well, then why are you? Right. So I'm going to avoid that right from the get-go. So
the other one that
my reflex. Yeah, because they usually have that chip on the shoulder. They're like, well, why are you doing it this way, Rick? We already got it locked down. It's like, then why are we here at midnight, guy? Like,
exactly.
Why are you approaching me at all if you got it?
Because remember this phone call at 3:00 in the morning being a fire thing.
Yeah.
Right. And again, that type of person is going to call you in the middle of the night going, hey, I can't log in right now. It's not a fire. It might be a fire to him, but it's certainly not a fire to me. I don't care if you can log in at 3:00 in the morning. Go to bed.
Yeah.
And so, it can wait.
A thing that would cause me pause in like initial engagement is if they don't want to know how much it costs.
Okay.
Right.
Have you ever had a client that's just they're so loaded that they don't care? I don't know if that's ever been
No.
Oh.
I've only ever had customers that aren't intending to pay you.
That happens a lot.
Oh yeah, it happens a lot. You sit down for a meeting, they sign a contract or whatever, or they're like, well, let's do a trial basis, right? They have no intention of paying you. They're just looking for free work. So if they're not interested in how much it costs, they're probably not interested in paying you. Right? Nobody has so much money that they don't care. I bet you Warren Buffett wants to know how much that shoe shine costs.
Yeah. Do you ever think people just kind of play the baller route? Have you ever seen that? I've seen people kind of play it. Everyone, like especially Azure Express routes, everyone wants them until the bill comes due, and then they're like,
I don't.
Oh, we thought we were ballers, but $100,000 a month, a little spendy. Nope.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I don't want an express route.
We ran into that working for you know who, when they wanted to build a BI server at Google,
Mm-hmm.
So we built them a BI server at Google. And I said, here's how much the monthly fee for that is going to be. And they're like, well, we can automatically spin that down. I said, nope, that's not how that shit works. Right? You're paying for a SQL license, you're paying for this, you're paying for that. You want all this speed, you want the, fast network drives or fast C drives and all this kind of stuff. It's going to cost this. And then when you want to work it up to the power that you need to actually do the BI, it's going to cost this much more. And it was an eye-popping thing for them. So
yeah, I had a friend of mine. She's a artist, and I heard the term "baller on a budget," and it just like killed me. It's like I'm a baller, but on a budget.
that is the definition of oxymoron right there.
Yeah, money is no object. Here's the price tag. Ooh, it's a big object. Let's cut that down. What about you, Andrew? You ever had like any red flags that you've seen or encountered or you look for?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Oh, I've never been an independent consultant, but I've worked for an MSP earlier on. I don't think I was ever part of like onboarding of a client. It was already an established client. But you never went into a place where, the sky was clear blue sky and the sun was shining and everything was a well-oiled machine. There's a reason you're there, right?
Yeah.
You're there because there's problems or something's going on. Not a whole lot of red flags I would take away from that. That was earlier on in my career. If I did that now, I probably would see things differently. But hindsight, a little bit, but at the end of the day, you just got to be, a good engineer or a good whatever you're doing that day, and it'll be fine. Yeah. Earning the trust of people there is really of the people who I worked with who were at those companies was very important. Yeah. So those people trusted me, where I don't know who you said it, like, just tell it how it is, don't fluff me up or whatever. So, but
nice.
Yeah.
Cool, man.
I don't know what happened to Brian. He disappeared.
Yeah. Who knows?
He's got
Sometimes
mad packet loss over by him.
Right. Sometimes even the network guy has issues with his network.
Yes.
Yeah. So I've got one.
You can't
I'd
fix
love to get
ISPs.
your guys. Yeah.
No,
I'd love to
he
get your guys.
was
input
having
on.
ISP problems the other day because we both share the same ISP and we both have business accounts. And he was having real problems. He showed me his smoke ping stuff and it was bad. And
Thanks.
so I was wondering, he might be having the same issues. I don't know. I did see that he like shut off his camera and then he's muted his mic and then he dropped off. So
yeah, it's kind of weird.
Anyway, sorry, Travis, we interrupted you, buddy.
Oh, no, it's fine. Yeah. So this was something that, like, my first MSP I worked at, the one that always bothered me was when scope of work is obfuscated or kept intentionally blurry. Because I would do like a contract. This was like when I was still in school. So I just had like a temp thing I found on Craigslist. It was as a network engineer. I do like 4 hours a week at a company and I'd be there from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And then I always asked the boss, I was like, hey man, the MSP, I'm like, what did we promise them? What's our SOW? Because they're asking for stuff and you want me to keep this time window, but I never leave a client if they're on fire. Like I just won't do it. And I'm like, anytime people have told me to do it, I'm like, if you go on speakerphone and tell me to leave, I'll do it so they hear it, so they know I'm not abandoning them. Fine. But the intentional like obfuscation of scope of work is like, what if you're getting money from them, but you've told them that we're going to give them X level of service, whatever. And if I can never get that, that's like a huge red flag for me. Because I'm all about like, whatever we've promised, I want to deliver as
Right.
much as I possibly can. But if I don't know what you've promised, it's hard for me to hit that target.
Yeah.
The MSP that Chris and I worked for was notorious for a long time. They were notorious about under quoting what it would take to get a project completed.
Mhm.
Right. So back in the days when small business server was the rage and all that, we get quoted 23, 24, 25 hours to do an entire project. And Chris and I remember Chris, you and I
Jesus.
fighting one time to, it takes 40 hours. It's a minimum. It's at least a week. Will you please stop doing these 2-day installs? It's crap. And yeah, so being on the other side of that, where the SOW was, here's what we're going to do, is whatever, and here's the timeline, and they completely shorten that timeline up to get that price down so the customer would at least bite on it. And then
Right.
I remember getting my ass handed to me because, well, we told them it would take 23 or 27 hours or whatever, and you've got 40 hours into this. I'm like, well, I've been telling you for years that it's going to take this much time. I don't understand why you're not listening to me. So
It was interesting. Best thing that ever happened to me at that company was when Rick left, because like I finally had the leverage to say to him, like they'd come to me and said like, yeah, we quoted this, and I'd look at it and like, that's great. It's going to take this much. And they're like, well, but we quoted this, and I said, I don't care.
Yeah.
I will not be held to account for your crappy quoting.
Mhm.
And like it's on you salespeople to make a compelling case to these people that like, yeah, the other company is quoting less hours or lower price or whatever. Like, make the case that we do good work, we stand by it, and we're going to see them through to completion, right? Like, do you want somebody that stands behind it and does good work for a reasonable price, or do you want to lie?
Mhm.
And they're like, well, but we're not going to get as many sales that way. I'm like, well, you're going to get even fewer sales over time if you keep up this way.
That's right. Because well, and they lost an engineer over it because I mean, that small private airline in our area pushed me over the top on that, because we went in and took them from a standard Windows environment and put in SBS, and they completely went in and undersold the whole deal. Because I remember going in and saying, these are the things that need to be done. And they're like, well, that doesn't need to be done. That doesn't, blah, 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 blah. And completely missed the mark on it, undersold it. And there was like 60, 65 hours into that project that we billed them like 28 hours for. Right. And I just kept getting my ass handed to me over it. And I'm finally like, well, the next job opened up that I followed one of our engineers there to, and then after a while, Chris followed me over there to it. So, I mean, they lost a couple of engineers over that practice, right? So, well, and I'm glad that Chris was able to, put his foot down over it, because it was miserable. I hated it. But
because you're putting that squeeze, you're in that vice between what the client expects and what the company that you work for is trying to expect, and they're completely at odds, and you're just that mashed potato in between. And it's a no-win situation.
I had to keep on doing what I could do, right? I couldn't afford to lose the job. I had a wife at home with cancer and a teenage daughter. So what am I going to do, right? I'm going to keep marching that, and do what I can do. But anyway, it is 10:15. I have to be up and out of bed at 4:30 in the morning because I have to be in Chicago at 7:30. So, wow. And I want to get there before the traffic gets bad. And parking is actually half price if you can park and get your space and pay for it by 8 o'clock, before 8 o'clock. So
nice.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I don't want to pay, is it $80 to park my car all day?
Oh, come on, Rick.
Yeah.
Stimulating the economy.
Yeah.
Whose economy? Not mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's all good. I think we're good. Any further comments from you guys? Travis, W2K? We all set?
Yeah.
Well,
pretty set.
It's a good call.
In the absence of Brian, I will take on the the traditional comments of
there is one more thing. Chris, what was your beverage of choice tonight?
I had a little Irish cream and then that really crappy scotch that requires ice.
Oh, there you go. go, Jesse. Did you imbibe today?
I did. I have. I'm on the Mexican beer kick.
Oh, the Modelo.
Oh,
Modelo's.
Modelo.
Very
What
nice.
about you, Rick? Oh,
I
thanks for the
had.
show.
Here we go. Kirkland water. Yes.
Oh, hold on, you lush. Notch it down a couple bits. Jesus.
Like I
man.
said, I have to be up at 4:30, so I'm not taking any chances tonight.
Here's mine. Stickman Bee's Knees. That's my kind of go-to mead beer. That
Oh, how
local
nice.
pizza
You know,
company
I'd love
brewery.
to try mead one time. I've never had it, so one of these days.
Send you a batch, man. I really like it, man. It was weird because I kind of liked it at first, but over time I was like, all right, I really like you. It's like a good summer beer for sure.
There you go, Chris. One of
Yeah.
these days, does anybody at Irish Fest? Do they do any? Is there a mead vendor or somebody there?
There
that
is.
has Mead?
Yeah.
You're gonna
Actually, if you're around this weekend, they for years have done a vodka and mead tasting at Polish Fest.
have.
And Polish Fest is this weekend.
I'm out of town on Saturday, but in town on Sunday.
Check it out.
Maybe
Check-
I will. Well,
Hit the website, see if they're still doing it, and
I
go
got
down
to
and
get
try it
my
out.
fence done in my backyard, so I might have to wait a bit. But
you know,
but there's always Irish Fest.
there is always Irish Fest.
Yes. So anyway, sorry for that. And
No worries.
take it away,
Was-
sir.
Thanks for coming. We hope you enjoyed. Hit that bell. Hit the subscribe button.
Smash
tell all
that
your
like
friends.
button.
Mash it.
And we'll see you hopefully within the next week or two.
Yep. All
You
right.
all have a great one,
You too.
and we'll talk soon.
Take care. Later.
See you, everybody.
Peace.